This video is in our Great Engine Attack series. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we're going to be looking at a game between Stockfish and Winter from the TCEC Swiss 2. It is an absolutely stunning game. It's a truly mind-blowing attack. The main tactical themes are quite familiar, but they're linked together by some quiet intermediate moves that are simply out of this world. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. The game's inspiration, and I think it's also very instructive for white players, white 1e4 players who have to face the Caro-Kann, because it arises from the type of position that can arise from many different variations. So have a look at this and be amazed. So this is the position after move 22, and Stockfish has just played the move knight to g4. Yeah, I mean, white is a little bit better here. Small space advantage. In particular, the light squared bishop is very passive, clamped down by the pawn on b4 and pawn on d4. But black has the open a file. Queen on e7, bishop on d6, attack the pawn on b4, so keep this bishop on d2 a little bit under wraps. The position's quite complicated simply. Slight advantage for white, but nothing amazing. And in actual fact, if you look at this position and you gave white the move, there would be nothing wrong at all with black's position. However, sometimes you have to move, and sometimes that's not a good thing, because in this position, Winter played the move knight to d5. We'll have a look at this one first of all, because it's the most fun and the most interesting. We'll have a look at the end probably just to have a quick look at other alternatives. So after knight to d5, what is black doing? I mean, it's a very aggressive move, this one. Black is actually attacking the b4 pawn and trying to say that this knight on g4 is offside. Now, as soon as knight d5 was played, Stockfish's evaluation jumped to about plus 2.5, but it's really more or less the only engine that gets this position so quickly. That really is an amazing part of it. I mean, I've run a lot of engine tests now between Stockfish and Komodo, Stockfish and Leela, Stockfish and Koivisto, and Stockfish and Revenge. And really, I mean, Stockfish is just, both winning many more games and defending many more as well. I mean, this is really an example of why Stockfish is clear number one. But what is the move after knight d5? Well, it's this move, knight takes h6 check. In itself, not unthinkable. G takes h6, we go queen g4 check. And now it's the first decision moment for black. I mean, people often ask me, could a grandmaster find a combination like this? And I mean, kind of one of the things about calculation during a game, it's not really the sacrifice itself, or even part of the main line that's the problem. You normally get that general sense quickly. It's the plausible alternatives that can occur along the way that really, I think, sap your energy and make it much more difficult to play combinations like this to any degree of accuracy. And this is quite a good case in point here, because I mean, there is the defense here, king h8. It's not 100% obvious how you're going to do this. The best move for white is to play the move queen h5. Pardon me. Just teeing up some more threats. Queen h6 check in particular, but also bishop h6 as well. But the problem with playing quiet moves in an attack is that that really increases your cognitive load an awful lot. Because, I mean, you just have to calculate a lot more moves when you play a quiet move. In this position, there's one really key idea that you have to understand. If you find this motif quickly, then you'll probably be able to calculate this reasonably quickly. And that's the idea that you really do want to take with a bishop on h6, not with a queen. I mean, taking with a bishop on h6 stops the king from escaping and introduces all sorts of threats. Queen g4 check in particular is a big threat, of course. If you go anything like f5, I've got queen g6 check and rook takes e6, or even after f5, I've got bishop takes f5 because the pawn on e6 is pinned. But what do I do about queen f6? That looks a slightly annoying move. The queen seems to be really active here. But here I've got an absolutely gorgeous idea, and that's this move rook e5. Threatening rook g5 check, which will be terminal, and after bishop takes e5, d takes e5, there's nowhere for this queen to go. Queen h8 would simply be met by queen g5 with checkmate. So king h8, not a good move, but yeah, I don't know, it's going to take you a few minutes to calculate it, and especially it's tough to calculate those lines when you know that there's also a very good alternative for black, which is to go king f8, bishop takes h6 check, king e8. Now, to calculate this with white, you've got to overcome a few mental things really, because chess players are very attuned, very much like shogi players in actual fact, to the idea that checking a king out of danger is not a good idea. And here this seems to be the case. I mean, we're taking pawns with check. We've already got 2 pawns for the piece, but the king's just coming around to d7, and the queen side looks pretty safe there. How are you going to increase the pressure? Something like queen g8, I just go king d7. A move like c4 might be interesting, but then we get hit with queen f6, hitting f2 and also hitting h6 as well. The first really important move, really, a kind of quiet move actually, and also a slightly unnatural move because it blocks the entry point of the queen. It's not c4. It's 26 bishop g5. And this is a really awkward move because, I've often talked about Stockfish's defense, that it's all about knocking the opponent's pieces from their perfect attacking positions. Yeah, same thing here with defense. This is all about knocking away the black pieces from their ideal defensive positions. The queen was perfect on e7, defending f7 and e6, and allowing the king to go to d7. After bishop g5, this has got problematical. But the lines themselves are actually quite complicated. Knight f6, I just go queen h4. That's easy. Knight is gone, nothing complicated. F6, I just go rook takes e6. Easy. But what happens after queen c7? After all, black's just going to go king d7 next move, get that king safe. Well, we do have an absolutely brilliant win, but it's not as obvious as all that. Here after knight e7, you've got a few little checks. You've got bishop g6, you've got queen g6, but after king d7, nothing to be done. Black is just winning. But actually, you have time to play the quiet move rook e1. The idea is very simply, you go rook a1, that seems very reasonable, swap off white's attacking piece, but then you go queen g8 check, bishop f5 check, beautiful, knight f5, queen e6 check. Now this I spotted, without too much difficulty, just by analysing by myself on the board. So, a number of these things are quite normal grandmaster solvable, I think you'd say. Presumably anyone like Caro-Kann or Magnus would be able to find much more. But I wouldn't characterise this as easy, and certainly not when you also have to consider the move queen to f8. It's not a new variation. Queen f8 here. Once again, black's threatening king d7. There is an absolute urgency to sacrifice the a rook there to keep the attack going. But to be honest, after bishop e7, it doesn't look like you've got an unbelievable amount of pieces in the attack, and black's got quite a lot of material around, and also the idea of going rook a1 to swap off the rooks. But strangely enough, we have bishop g6, queen d6 check, very important move, king c8, and now something that always makes me think of probably the best work I did on attacking play that I ever did in my career. I looked at Tal's games, and I decided, to put it very simply, that Tal's attacks, although a lot of them were very spectacular, they were all about taking stuff and attacking stuff. Essentially when you take a piece, you force the opponent to recapture. That gives you another tempo in order to attack. And that's often extremely crucial. And but somehow intuitively, you often avoid looking at moves that exchange pieces, because when you're attacking, you want to keep as many pieces as possible. But here, in actual fact, bishop takes c7 is pretty strong. Queen takes c7, unfortunately for black, allows the move bishop to f5 check, winning on the spot. And after knight takes e7, there's this awesome move, bishop h5. This is, really starting to get unbelievably difficult to calculate. And the idea is that bishop g4 check is, you're heading to this diagonal. And all these blocked black pieces, they're just very hard to extricate. You can't go knight f5 because queen takes f8 check. However, black does have bishop a6, and if bishop g4 will escape. But then we go rook e1, and we're preparing to bring the rook into e7. Something like rook a7, for example, would allow bishop g4, king b7, rook e7 check, king a8, rook a7 check, followed by queen f8. So, black actually has to play rook a1, desperado, but, black's still a piece up after giving back the rook. King b7, bishop f3, and, Stockfish is setting this as, +5. I don't know, just from my point of view, I'm still thinking, well, maybe chances, but, the subsequent lines that Stockfish gives are very convincing. This does seem to be, a clear win, but still, from my point of view, this is still, this still looks like a mess in anyone's game, really, so, very, very difficult to calculate those variations. And, of course, on top of that, you've got to calculate the main line as well. It's, I think you can see why, I sort of feel it wouldn't be amazingly likely that a human could prosecute this attack from start to finish, put it that way. I think you'd need a little bit of luck and missing the right things in order to be able to do it. So black plays queen d7, and that's a pretty good move. Black has to defend e6, but now, of course, the bishop on g5 is stopping the king from escaping, as if by magic. The king is caught in a box there. So, suddenly all the principles of attack, that you're not suddenly chasing the king away with useless checks. You've really caught the king in the centre now. How do you proceed? I think there's two ways to proceed here, and I think one is probably the most natural human way. The other way really requires some very deep calculation. Queen h5 is pretty powerful. Just aiming for h8. And after bishop e7, this was a game by Stockfish against Revenge. White's just going to play f5, open up the centre. It's a very unpleasant position for black. And the nice thing, when you compare it to the game at least, is that white hasn't played c4, so this rook on a2 remains passive. I think this would be a pretty human way of playing. I think this would be quite easy. For example, f6, bishop h6, queen f7, f5, and you'd assume that it's just completely winning for white, even if the engine can put up some defence that you hadn't really seen. But Stockfish played probably an even stronger move, which is the move c4. And it's quite funny, this move, because back on move 12, black played b5, to make c4 unattractive. And certainly when you do stuff like this at an early stage, you often sort of feel, it remains as an imprint in your mind, and you say, well, c4 is never attractive for white. And positionally, maybe not so much, but there's a few tactics that have been added to the game. Namely that this bishop on c4 is attacking the rook on a2, and that's going to gain a tempo. Now, it's worth pointing out that Leela's main move in this position, and also Stockfish's as well, was the move knight c7, which is just trying to hold everything together. But, we were getting this position, which Stockfish also reached as black against Koivisto. Rook takes, and queen b5. And, materially, black's not doing too badly, but these types of positions, now I've seen them many times in all my engine games, they just always turn out good for white, simply because this bunch of pieces is just really passive. The black king is still weak, very hard for black to get at the white king, and this h-pawn, as Mr. Beads pointed out in the chat, is a runner. So king d7, queen h5, bishop f4, Corvisto played it very nicely here and just, gradually ground Stockfish down, and the h-pawn started to run. So c4, b takes c4 played, and then bishop takes c4. Now, ideally, black would just love to ignore this attack on the rook, and give back some material to break the flow of white's attack. However, the big problem with that is that white's actually picked up 2 pawns on the way. So if you win back this exchange, you'll have rook and 2 pawns for 2 pieces, bishop and knight. Not a bad deal materially. And then on top of that, you've got all these passive pieces, bishop on b7. Your king's completely safe, and this h-pawn's a runner. It's just basically every factor is in white's advantage. So from that point of view, it's much more natural for black to hold on to the extra material and just try and weather the storm. At least the material situation is advantageous for you. So, Leela was always trying to defend in my engine matches with rook to a7. But there's one gorgeous finish that I just wanted to show you there. Bishop takes d5, takes, bishop f6, this key idea of Stockfish. Remove the knight, bring the bishop in, the queen's free to come to the 8th rank. Bishop a6, queen g8, bishop f8, rook e5, this rook's coming round to h5. Queen d6, b5. We're going to see this move again. It's very common just to try and gum up the black pieces, not give that light-squared bishop an opportunity to get active and maybe involve itself in the defence of the king side. That's who was that playing against Cheng? Invictus was playing against Cheng. Invictus was winning. We'll see how that turned out. So rook b8, rook h5, rook takes b5, rook c1. With these attacks, Julian Hodgson once described an attack of Joël Luthier against Peter Lico as an everlasting attack, because it was an attack that started on something like move 20 and kept on going until move 50. And in many of these games, you have the feeling that this is what you're seeing from Stockfish. So a little bit of shuffling there, and then we get rook h7. Rook c7, and then a beautiful move, which I think you could easily put in a tactical puzzle. Maybe you want to stop the video just to have a look. It's rook takes c6 check. And after queen e6, we've got queen f8 check, which just wins on the spot. And king d7, rook f7, and if king c6, we've got queen c5 check. Just, it's just non-stop beautiful tactics from Stockfish here. So after rook c2, we now come across, another extremely deep move. Bishop d5 is kind of a natural move. C takes d5. After all, that's what you wanted, isn't it? You wanted to get rid of the knight, bring the bishop into f6, and get the queen to the 8th rank. The only problem is that the 7th rank has been opened, so rook a2 is coming in, and bishop f6 is met by rook a2, and the counterplay against the f2 pawn is coming very, very quickly. So what Stockfish does in this position is just beautiful, and again, I'm not sure I would ever spot this simply. It's the move bishop b3. You knock the rook off the 7th rank, and now you take on d5. The result of it is, if you want to get your 7th rank counterplay, you're going to have to play rook c2 again afterwards. And of course, white's already coming in with very concrete threats. So, essentially, you're gaining a couple of tempi in the attack, which, of course, is absolutely massive. So here, Winter played bishop f8, which was not the best move. The best move was rook a2. And bishop queen g8 check there, and now quite an amazing point of the game, because I've got I was running Leela against Stockfish from this position, and Leela didn't make any more than a draw from this position, whereas Stockfish was winning every single game, and the difference was in this move, this next move, b5. What on earth is the point of b5? Let me show you a Leela game, and then you'll get the idea. h4 is one of white's most basic ideas. Just run that h-pawn up the board. There's very little that black can do against this. However, what black has some incredible counterplay based around the 7th rank. And the idea is that if we go h5. We now play rook takes f2, rook takes f2, takes queen c2 check, king g3. And now there's another amazing point to this, because actually the obvious queen b1 h6 simply wins for white. There's nothing that that black can do to stop this h-pawn. There's no perpetual that he can organise. But in actual fact, what black does is play the move queen f5, basically just trying to knock this bishop away before the h-pawn advances. And well, one Leela game went bishop g5, h6, check, queen takes d4, queen e5, and amazingly, this is just going to end in some sort of perpetual. Bishop c8 check, queen b1, queen f5 check, queen h3, and perpetual. You know, absolutely amazing. I can't possibly calculate that, but I just believe it when I see it in a game between these two monsters. Queen f5, if you just go h6, I just go queen f6, king d7, bishop d6 check, and then I pick up this rook. And well, this position is actually drawn apparently as well. The queen is coming round to h1, and the black king is quite safe. You know, it's just absolutely amazing tactics, this. But that was what Leela was falling for all the time. And one of the key points is, you might say, well, let's get our rook out of the way then. You know, rook takes f2 followed by queen c2, hitting that loose rook on b1 is annoying. Why don't I play a move like rook b e1? The problem then is that black plays bishop a6, hitting the rook on f1, and then after this one's gone, you're definitely going to be able to get through with a sacrifice and give perpetual. Bishop a6. Haha! I think you can understand. This was about when I started looking at these games of Leela's, I suddenly understood what the point was. Why do you go b5? You go b5 to stop bishop a6. So after rook c2, I just go rook f1. And after queen c8, I just go rook b e1. No bishop a6, completely safe, and I'm just going to go h4 to h5 to h6 to h7 to h8. And it is just completely winning. There is absolutely nothing that black can do. I mean, that's pretty amazing, right? I mean, I can understand it now when I've seen the lines, but yeah, I mean, yeah. Could a grandmaster find this? Not a hope. I can tell you, not a hope. Even in this position, I mean, if I didn't know there was something, and no one had told me, I wouldn't find it. If you told me there was something, maybe I'd find it, but I'm not 100% sure. So absolutely incredible play, but very inspirational. You know, I mean, I've definitely got this in my memory bank now. So you never know. You might get an attack, and you might say b5. I understand it. Well, Winter played another move after bishop f6. Played bishop f8. And I mean, you could continue in a very similar fashion, in actual fact, with white, but Stockfish just found another idea, which was again extraordinarily beautiful. Moved the h-pawn, and then played this move bishop h4. And from a human point of view, this is a really difficult move to find, because your bishop looks perfect on f6, and by retreating the bishop from a perfect square to defend something, you sort of think, you know, am I losing my grip on the position? But in actual fact, there's no sense of that at all. The bishop is just covering f2. The rooks now are free to play. Bishop e7, I just go queen g8 check, and you're back in the box. And after rook d2, rook b3 happened. b5, why not? Why not stop bishop a6? Rook f3, bishop c8, queen g5. We're hitting that rook on d2, and we're just threatening h6 to h7. Well, Winter started giving away pieces, but yeah. It was completely over. No point in looking at the rest of that. So I mean, that was an absolutely amazing attack. I mean, yeah, I just can't get. I just simply can't believe it. I mean, it's a thing of rare beauty. I think it's very interesting though to look at what else could have happened on move 22. So I mean, knight takes g4 was what Stockfish played. Queen g4, king f8, and against Koivisto, it just sort of offered a pawn for compensation here and played queen f5, looking for something like queen d5, and well, the active rooks and the good bishop against the bad bishop, that compensates for the pawn deficit, you know. And Stockfish held this very easily. Stockfish had a little bit more of a difficult time holding it against Leela, or you know, a little bit harder time, but still nothing particularly amazing, you know. So so that was you know, a very solid way to play. Rook 8a7 was another move that Winter was considering, but it's really bad actually, because after knight h6, the problem is, well, in lots of defences, the rook on a7 here needs to be on a8 to defend g8. I'll show you why that's the case after. But here, white just plays bishop g5, and well, I can show you a game of Stockfish against Koivisto. Bishop e7, queen e5, knight g8, and then the lovely move bishop h7, threatening queen h8. And after bishop f6, Koivisto gave back well, the piece, got a pawn back, but you know, the black king's still in trouble, and yeah, Koivisto didn't last very long from this position. The slightly hilarious thing is that, you know, when running Leela games in this position, after knight g4, so Leela first of all looks at knight d5, you know, for a very long time, and then afterwards switches to this move rook 8a3. And the idea is, well, the idea is to sort of, you know, in all these sacrifices on h6 now, black's already got a move like rook takes d3 to destroy an attacking piece. So actually this is a very good defense against knight takes h6 check. The only slightly sad thing is that after bishop c1, rook a8, Stockfish was playing bishop d2, and here unfortunately Leela wasn't playing rook 8a3, Leela was then playing knight d5, after which knight h6 check was the same sacrifices in the game, just 2 moves later. So that's a little bit sad there. A little bit of Mr. Beads' amnesia there, affecting Leela, I fear. Yeah, so I mean that's a little bit irritating, but in principle, bishop c1, you know, rook a8 is a decent defense, and bishop d2, you should simply play rook 8a3 again. Knight takes h6 is quite interesting, very dangerous in actual fact. But black can defend here, but I don't know whether I would find this defense. So bishop c7, in order to be able to play queen d6 to h2, just unpin from any bishop g5 pin. Queen d1, c5, activating the bishops. Rook e5, beautiful, blocking this bishop's diagonal, threatening rook g5. Bishop e5, de is very unpleasant for black. But then you've got this essential move rook g8. That's why you need this rook on a8. That's why this move rook 8a7 is bad. And well, Stockfish held this, even Revenge held this against Stockfish in this sort of way. So you know, it's very, very fraught, you know, and this still looks extremely unpleasant to me. But Stockfish managed to you know, managed to hold this, so you know, not too bad. So I mean, rook 8a3 is possible, you know, and but essentially, I mean, you know, from this position, black should really be just exchange off the knights and just try and stay still, and yeah, you know, just wait for white to try and do something. But you know, it's not really that easy for white, especially without knights in such a position. You're clamping down on the bishops, but you know, you'd love a knight to have an outpost to tease out some weaknesses. Not so easy to do with just the bishops and the rooks on the board, especially when when black's controlling the open A file. So yeah, I mean, I hope you enjoyed this one. I mean, I really think that you know, I do feel that, you know, that engine games are the real pinnacle of chess, and you know, when you see attacks like this, I think attacks that, you know, could easily maybe have the possibility might have been there in a human game, but you would just never have seen it, you know. And but with you know, with engines running, engines actually playing the games out, you know, you get to see them. And yeah, I mean, the accuracy of these bishop moves is incredible. And you know, and bishop b3, but the whole, you know, the whole feel of it is so gloriously you know, precise and aggressive. It's a real artwork, this one. So there we are. I mean, I hope you enjoyed that too. If you liked the video, please give me a like. if you like the channel, then please subscribe. Lots more stuff, some longer videos like this where we really take the time to, to look at a beautiful, complicated position. And there's a lot of other, much shorter videos where, we just focus on one move and say, wow, look at this, wasn't this amazing? If you enjoyed, then please do subscribe, and please do consider my book, the Silicon Road to Chess Improvement, which has got so many beautiful games like this, and I think really organizes the material really well, so that you can learn from it yourself, apply it in your own games, and also gives lots and lots of interesting tips on how to train with engines. I've got a number of very interesting ways of doing that I think nobody else does. So there we are. Thanks very much for watching, and hopefully see you with the next video.